Wilson. Craig, that was a disastrous night for TCU. Obviously, getting there is a huge deal, a massive, massive season run to where they got. But last night, I mean, if anyone would have said that Georgia would have dominated the game, I would have thought maybe 40-17, something like that. But that thing got off the rails in a hurry.
Yeah, it did. Congrats to Georgia. They are clearly the best team in college football. I know that there's probably some Alabama fans or Ohio State fans that still would like to argue that, still would like to see, them match up another time in the Tide's case and another time in Ohio State's case, I bet, as well. But Georgia got to the title game, and so did TCU. And what we saw last night with those two going toe-to-toe was an absolute squash, an absolute bloodbath, and an all-time historic beatdown in college football and bowl history and national championship history. You pretty much name it. If you were thinking of what is a nightmare scenario for TCU, as great of a season as they've had, all the exposure, the untold millions of dollars in free advertising and things of that nature, the thrilling wins, all of that, what could be the worst possible way to end your season outside of tragedy, right? And right. Obviously we're not talking about that. So what could be the worst way to end your season? I think that was it last night. I think getting beat by 58 points in the national championship game and never really having a chance beyond the first half.
Not even that deep.
I mean, not even that. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is not even that really. That was rough. That was bad, and that was an incredible showing by the Georgia Bulldogs, who are an awesome team, and TCU is a great team as well. But that was a major reality check last night.
Here are some quotes from Kirby Smart, and when he mentioned this in the post game after the win, it made a lot of sense to me, and I think it made a lot of sense to others. And I even saw other fan bases say, "Yep." The disease that creeps into your program, he's talking about when you have success, is called entitlement. I've seen it firsthand, Smart said. If you can stomp it out with leadership, then you can stay hungry. And if you have a saying, and we have a saying around our place, we eat off the floor. And if you're willing to eat off the floor, you can be special. That's one of what you see when it comes to Super Bowl teams that don't repeat anymore. The Patriots, of course, were different with what they did many, many times under Bill Belichick with Tom Brady at quarterback, among others. But entitlement. And Georgia, even though in the semifinals they were a field goal being made away from not being in the game yesterday evening, they were able to at least avoid that. And in the end, they are the national champions back-to-back years.
Yeah, I mean, I think entitlement is a dangerous deal. I believe that we saw that to some extent with Baylor this past season, of a team that felt like they had won a Big 12 and Sugar Bowl title last year, and that was just going to be the way that it is, and just show up, and that's basically what you'll accomplish. And that was clearly not the case. This was a brand new team that got smacked around a bit more than they ever could have expected, and got brought down to earth in a major way. So I would think that for Dave Aranda's program, entitlement won't be it should not be much of an issue, at least in the immediate future. But that's just an example. There's plenty of other examples out there of teams or coaches or what have you, players being entitled, and it doesn't normally end very well. And, when you're Georgia and you beat just about everybody, save, Alabama, or a scare against Ohio State, and you've already won the national title last year, and, you're destroying teams up and down your schedule. I mean, I know you can look at that, Alabama, or you can look at maybe the Tennessee game sort of kind of, but, I mean, they demolished a good portion of their schedule. I mean, there were a lot of blowouts on the Georgia schedule this past year. So
they had two close calls, really. They had the game with Missouri when they had to kind of find a way to win, and they did, and everybody has to have one of those. Right. And then, of course, the game last week against Ohio State.
So when you're the defending national champions and you're destroying pretty much everybody on your schedule week after week after week, you're recruiting the top recruiting class. I mean, what is your edge? What is your edge? And so, I think for some guys, it's their personal stories and backgrounds that keeps them edgy and fueled up and always motivated. But I do think that success can lead to, kind of resting on your laurels or just feeling like, hey, we're Georgia and we're from the big bad SEC, and this lame team from the Big 12 is not going to, out-physical us or outman us or what have you. And so I think Kirby Smart, the best thing that happened to his team, and I feel like there was a number of people thinking the same way last night, was that Ohio State game. I don't know that if they go and they beat Ohio State by 17 or 20 points like they did a lot of other teams this year, I don't know that they show up the way that they did last night.
They were pissed off when they got
there. They were
there.
pissed
Yeah.
off. They were ready to go. They felt disrespected. They had fake, stories in their heads planted masterfully by the motivator and Kirby Smart of, making his team believe that people actually didn't believe in them to some extent. It's like, I don't think anybody doubted Georgia, really in many ways at all. But somehow or another, a team showed up last night that you would have thought that they had been picked to not even become bowl eligible this season. And yet, they played like that, and yet they aren't that team. They are obviously one of, if not the most talented teams in college football and the defending champions, and now the repeat champions. But, yeah, they needed to come in there, I think, with an edge last night, and they did, and that was bad news for TCU. That was the last thing that they needed to see, and it became clear pretty quickly why that was a bad thing.
When Holly Rowe, and again, I thought TCU, I thought they could win the game. That's how dumb I was. I don't know. I mean, it was never close. 10-7, okay. But, I mean, they just had their boats, just blown up out of the water. And, again, they're not alone. They're not alone. But here's when I heard Kirby Smart say this right before kickoff, we can't use the audio for copyright reasons. But he said something to Holly Rowe. She said something to the effect, how do you know if your team is ready, or what are your thoughts about the game, etc.? And he said, we are hunting tonight. We are going hunting tonight. Now, this is the team that somehow found a chip on their shoulder, as Craig was mentioning with Kirby Smart. But the way he said it, when he said it, I was like, oh, my God. They are locked in, not just who they are physically because they're gifted, but also who they are mentally. And pretty much from the beginning, that was the case.
Yeah, I mean, they were dominant. It doesn't get more lopsided than that. It never has. That was history.
We were at a game, you and I, when we were in Tempe, Arizona, 62-24, Nebraska, Florida, right? Remember how much of a beatdown that was? And that doesn't even match the one we saw last night.
No, I don't think anybody even brought that up that I saw. Maybe some people did on your timeline, but that one, that didn't register with me. But now that you say it, yeah, that was a pretty lopsided game. The one I did see quite a bit of was USC, Oklahoma, when that game was, between two teams that were far more eye-to-eye than those two teams last night. I mean, Oklahoma had, two of the Heisman Trophy finalists, and I think that was the year that Bush or Leinart won, so they didn't win it. But Jason White and Adrian Peterson, I think, or some combination of that. It was an all-USC Oklahoma Heisman final, and so they were, pretty eye-to-eye with USC. Oklahoma had been winning a bunch of games, and obviously it had the national title, somewhat recently before that, had played for another one after that and lost to LSU that kind of kickstarted the SEC empire. But then there was also USC, and then eventually they'd come crumbling down, with the end of the Pete Carroll era. And then pretty much since then it's been, Ohio State here, but pretty much all SEC. And so, yeah, I just that was something else. That really was. That was something else, and hard to wrap your mind around just how good Georgia is and how much of a separation there is between them and many other schools out there.
We will, and again, those of you